whole show possible. So Central Indiana Science Outreach, or CINSO, is a local organization, as is Indiana Sciences, Indiana Humanities, Indiana Public Library. These are all organizations filled with people who make books, booze, and bearings possible. And we really appreciate everyone to make the season a possibility, especially with a hybrid in-person and online event. And so with that, I want to turn it over to our guests. Our guests today are Dr. Chin-Chun Lin, Professor of Economics at Indiana University Northwest, and Dr. Subir Bandyopadhyay, who is a Professor of Marketing at IU Northwest. So we usually start off with guests introducing themselves briefly. So Dr. Lin, if you want to start with just a little bit of who you are, what you do, your economics background relating to this book.
My name is Chin-Chun Lin. As she said, I'm the professor of economics at Indiana University Northwest campus. And my main research area is economics of education, economic education, and consumer economics. So I do a lot of utility theory, those things. And I also serve for several journals as the editor-in-chief. And so I review a lot of papers and read a lot of papers and determine a lot of decisions. Some people are happy, some people are not happy with my decision. That's me.
Dr. Bandyopadhyay?
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Subir Bandyopadhyay, Professor of Marketing. I'm a senior Fulbright scholar. My main areas of research are many areas, but I'll say a few. Global business, international marketing, marketing models, consumer behavior, and all that. So Chin-Chun comes from the economic side of consumer behavior, and I come mostly from the psychology/economic side of consumer behavior. So I get it, what Thaler says to some extent. So I look forward to talk to you guys.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. And thank you for being here. So let's go right into one of the major concepts or terms, I guess, in the book that Thaler talks about. In this book, Misbehaving, The Making of Behavioral Economics, Richard Thaler talks quite a bit about econs. And so just as a brief introduction, on page 4, there's a quote where he introduces the term where he's talking about economic models, and he says, the problem is with the model being used by economists, a model that replaces Homo sapiens with a fictional creature called Homo economicus, which I like to call an econ for short. Compared to this fictional world of econs, humans do a lot of misbehaving, and that means that economic models make a lot of bad predictions. So with that in mind, and the idea that Thaler doesn't believe that econs are the ideal for building economic models because they don't take into account complex human behavior and emotional impacts that human beings would have. So this is a question for both Dr. Lin and Dr. Bandyopadhyay is, are there economic models that you think do take into account complex human behaviors? And either way, how do you think that your fields are moving towards that direction of being able to form or think of economic models that are more accurate and more predictable?
Yes, let me take a first crack at that. The answer will be yes, there are some models which do not strictly go by the expected utility theory, whereas you rightly pointed that people are supposed to take the best decision given this under the circumstances, but more often than not, they do not. So one theory that comes to mind, and that was one of the papers that I read back when I was doing my PhD, is called the prospect theory. And this is written by two of Thaler's colleagues, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. And essentially they are saying that people make different kind of judgments when faced with a gain or a loss. So they tend to spend more importance on the possibility of getting a loss. So they want to prevent that. So that's where it departs from the classical economic theory. So that would be one. And the next one that comes to my mind is the mental accounting. It's kind of a theory that Thaler has, Again, the same idea is that people make judgments mentally to come up with the best choices and decisions, but often they fail if you consider the classical economic theory. So Tin may have some other examples.
Yes, when I read the Dr. Taylor's book, and yeah, it's interesting, and he provides many examples. But I carefully read his examples. I cannot 100% agree with him that our human behaviors violate or is inconsistent with economic theory, especially his chapter 3. If you read his chapter 3, you will find I do not really agree. For example, in chapter 3 he lists the 5 examples. And let me talk about the first example why I do not agree with him. He said that he and his friend Jerry and got the 2 free tickets and to go to the basketball game in Buffalo. And from the place they live is Rochester to Buffalo is to drive 1.5 hours. However, there's a snowstorm, so they decide not to go. But his friend Jeffrey said, okay, if they purchase this expensive ticket, he would like to go. He would attempt to go. And his explanation is such kind of behavior is inconsistent. He said the sunk cost will not affect the choice whether to go or not. Well, I agree, sunk cost does not affect. But when I read these examples, I do not see this example is about the sunk cost. It's about the expected utility and expected cost, which I will use the theory of cost-benefit analysis. When we watch the game, you must have an expected utility, or you can say expected benefit. And if there's no, and of course you have an expected cost because you have to drive there, you have a time cost, you have a travel cost, you have opportunity cost. Even though the ticket is free, you still have those costs. So if there's no snowstorm, they definitely will go. That means their expected profit is positive. The reason they did not go that because the cost increased because of snowstorm. So there's more risks. So their cost increase. And then their expected benefit becomes negative. So they will not go. His friends said, if we purchase the ticket, and the ticket I assume is very expensive, then he would like to go. And then he said it is not consistent behavior. I think it's consistent because when you purchase a ticket, the higher the price you pay, the higher expected utility you will have. For example, I can give you one example. The public school and the tuition. If we send when parents send their kids to private school, then we would expect the private school will provide a high quality teaching and service, and will get a high expected benefit. But public school, free tuition, since it is free, so your expected benefit is lower. So your expecting benefit is lower, and then you have a snowstorm, your cost increase. So now your expected profit becomes negative. But now if you pay a lot of money to buy this ticket, your expected utility, or you can say expected satisfaction or expected benefit increase a lot. It's much higher than free ticket. So even though there's a snowstorm, the cost maybe for the jury, maybe the expected cost is lower than the expected profit, expected benefit. That's why his friend would like to go. That means for his friend, the expected profit is positive. Here I need to point out one thing is everybody's expected profit is differently. Expected because we value everything, the cost and the benefit differently. So for Dr. Taylor may think his expected profit is still negative, but for his friend, the expected profit is positive. So that's why he wants to go. If he use this theory of cost-benefit analysis, I don't think his friend's behavior is inconsistent with the economic theory. Yeah, and I think this. I agree. I agree. The sunk cost will not affect your choice. But this example is not about the sunk cost. It's about your expected utility and expected cost. So that's why his friend want to go. And I think this example may be misleading to other readers. Of course, the other examples also I do not agree. But I might think I may not have enough time, so leave other people to ask.
Okay. Just, I think I did mention this in the beginning, but if people have questions, because it's on Zoom and it's harder, if you have questions, if you want to use the reactions to the bottom to raise your hand, we can call on you to ask questions while the guests are talking as well. So just keep that in mind. So Dr. Lin, I wanted to clarify one thing. So when you talk about the sunk cost fallacy, because that is how Thaler described it in the book with that example. So you're saying that it's having like a positive or expected profit that is positive is not necessarily part of like a sunk cost fallacy, or it's not the same thing.
When I value this this example, when I read this example, I don't think Dr. Taylor focused on the sunk cost. Yeah, if this is sunk cost, I agree. The sunk cost is fixed. Once you pay, it will not affect anything. But the point is, you watch it again. It's like we watch a movie again. We will get utility. We are human beings. We are not the machine. You do something, you don't have any feeling, you don't have any satisfaction. You will get a satisfaction. So that satisfaction, you must have expect utility. So you need to count those expect utility. Then you need to count your expected cost, not just sunk cost. The ticket is sunk cost, but you have other cost, and you will get your expect utility. Then the subtract the expect cost, then you will get the expect benefit. So that means what? Means everybody in your daily life, you always make a decision. So the cost benefit analysis is always exist in everyone. Even though you are not economist, even though you are just a student or you never study economics like my son, 12 years old, even another son, 4 years old, they already have the benefit and the cost and analysis. That's normal, naturally. So we need to consider the benefit and the cost, not just focus on the sunk cost. If you only focus on cost, everybody's behavior is not consistent with the economic theory.
I see. Okay, so it does actually fall in line with the idea that we do need a better understanding or incorporation of more complex human behaviors,
Yes,
right? Because
yes.
with the sunk cost fallacy, you're saying that it generalizes a lot of human behavior versus needing more complexity to that so that you can actually predict.
Yeah.
So when I read Dr. Taylor's examples, I figure one thing, he ignored human beings' feeling. Yeah, and those feeling converted to economics becomes utility, becomes satisfaction. It does exist, but you cannot see. If, for example, I cannot see your satisfaction unless you tell me. But you value your satisfaction must be different from I value satisfaction. We may watch the same movie or like audience watch us, me and Dr. Spear, the presentation, but you guys must have a different satisfaction. So you must have a different satisfaction and you must have your cost. For example, you spend 1 hour here to listen to us. If you do not listen to us, do not sit here, you can do something else. So you have your option cost, not just a sunk cost, not just that so easy a sunk cost. You have other costs, and you will receive the benefit. For example, you may listen to my presentation, just, oh, thank God, I realized. It's like some students tell me, thank you, I go to your lecture and I learned something. But other students may think, what the hell, this guy, I have no idea what he's talking about. But some students may think, good, wonderful, I like this lecture. So everybody has different expectation. Everybody has different expected utility, and they get a different satisfaction. We need to consider that,
Right.
not just
Okay.
not just focus on the sunk cost.
Gotcha. Okay. Dr. Bandyopadhyay, were you starting to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say another example will be, which is does not follow the expected utility, will be the choice heuristics. He has used the term heuristics at a number of places. So I'm a marketing professor after all. So I get it that when you go to the grocery store and you have buying say salt or sugar, and you are not that involved in that product category. So we simplify our choice rules by saying that, okay, I'll buy the one that is cheapest, or I'll buy the one which is on a deal. So we do not look at any other attribute or property of the product. So that is that's not really following the utility. I think Tinchen Paras will say that you're reducing the amount of time otherwise you will use to search. So there is a search cost. So they're minimizing that. But from psychological point of view, we'll say that it is a model which does not follow the expected utility model that much. So choice heuristics.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, I want to point out one thing as a psychologist and the economist, we study human behavior, but we look at the different things. And I'm not psychologist, but I believe they look at the different things. But the economist, we always look at the cost benefit analysis. Yeah, and to discuss the human behavior and discuss human decision.
Okay. Thank you for that very informative analysis. I do appreciate that. I think it was obvious for me in reading the book that yes, we do need more behavioral influences, or have more of an intersection between behavioral and psychological analysis of people, and which we already do to a certain degree. Like Dr. Bandyopadhyay said, we already use a lot of psychology in marketing, for example. So that's obviously something you would want to incorporate, because that, you would want to know more about people and their behaviors and how it affects economics too on a grander scale. So yes, that all makes sense. So I want to talk about another idea that was also very interesting to me, and I think that you both would have a really nice a different viewpoint on this. So Thaler talks about what is considered acceptable and what is unfair, and that also depends on behavior. So to human beings, unlike to econs, the idea of fairness is usually impacted by their behavior and emotional aspects. And one example that Thaler provided was the example of the snow shovels. So snow shovels usually cost $15, but after a snowstorm, I believe this is on page 127. So after a snowstorm, companies might raise the price to $20. And the idea is that econs would think that this is normal and acceptable, but obviously to human beings, that pricing model is not considered fair. And I wanted to think about this, but from a different viewpoint. So to see if you have any ideas on this, do you think that that people who individually do things that are considered unfair, like scamming people or selling counterfeit items, things like that, are punished more severely than, say, like institutions or larger organizations that might act unfairly also towards people? And if so, why?
Yeah, so there are two things there. One is that the shovel example, and the explanation I think comes straight from the supply demand theory. So if there is a demand after the snowstorm, a lot of people want to have the shovels. So there is a more demand and supply may not be there. So as a result, the prices is going up to the equilibrium point. Another example is that the gas prices are out of the roof now. And why is that? Because of the supply chain is being impacted globally. So there is less oil around. the OPEC is closing the tap to control the supply. So the demand is kind of going up vis-a-vis the supply. So the prices go up. So that is an explanation for that. And there, somebody can make an ethical argument that why to fleece the consumers when they really need it. But from a laissez-faire point of view, they are not bound to buy it from a store. You can go to another store and all that. So as long as they have that choice, so it is just fine to increase the prices. The second question that you have about that micro issue that one person violates the rules and the law of the hand comes down heavily, and as a corporation violates the rules all the time, but the punishments are much lower. I think the explanation comes from other fields, which are the legal aspects as well as the political aspects. I think it is not a economic issue. Why I say legal? Because the legal system that we have is unfortunate. If you do not have money, you do not have good representation, and there are 3 strikes and you go in. And if you have a same thing for a rich kid, does the same thing, and he or she will have representation and he will come out. And if you just take it to the aggregate level for a corporation, they have deep pockets. So the violations are very severe, but they will do a plea bargain with the government and ensure they pay some penalties and all that, but they come out pretty much scot-free. So I do not know about any economic model that explains, but I can see the legal and political aspects explains it perfectly. I'll let Tin-Chin talk about it.
Yeah, I think that if I remember correctly, the Dr. Taylor's example about shovel is that if I'm wrong, please correct me. He asked people who never studied economics, and people might be surprised why the price increased after snowstorm. And then he asked his MBA students. Those MBA students must have studied economics before, so they said reasonable. So if I were him, I would not ask people who ever studied economics, because if you ask people who already studied economics, in your mind you will be controlled by economic theory. So that's why it will be controlled by demand supply. So you might think, okay, that's reasonable. We should ask people who never studied economics, and then their mind will not be controlled by economic theory. So if people's reaction is surprised, why after snowstorm you increase the price? I still want to use the expected utility and the expected cost to explain it, because they might think my utility does not change, but why cost suddenly increases? So that is at the moment they will fear their profit decrease. That's why they were surprised.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So to my question of whether or not you think that there's a difference between individuals who might be violating some of those rules or acting unfairly, do you have a take on that from like an economics theory, or maybe even like if you think that behavioral economics can help solve that issue in some way, models that can help with that?
I think not necessarily we violate the economic theory and the models. It depends on how you explain it. And we have many different theories, and we cannot just focus on one theory and to explain, okay, he violated. It's like the chapter 3. I even can give you more examples. For example, he said one person said, Nina, he said, look at the 1 by clock. and the one store sells $45, and the other store, the same store, just a branch, just 10 minutes away, and they sell $35, and you can save $10. But the same if buy television set, and the one store sell $495, and the branch store only sell $785, and they also save $10. If Nina drive 10 minutes to another branch store to buy the small one, which is a crack, and this is not consistent, not the bigger one, this is not consistent because owes $10. But I do not view the same way. You need to view the discount rate. $10 divided $45 is 22.22%. Another one, $10 divided by $495 is only 2%. So if you drive 10 minutes to save 22% is worth. You don't want to spend 10 minutes to go to just to save 2%. So that's why a lot of stores, they give you coupon, they said 10% or 20%. They don't tell you how many dollars you save. I can give you one example, because in our mind, we care about the percentage, not the amount. Let me give you one real example. Several days ago, I think there's a couple months ago, my older son, 12 years old, he never took SAT. And one day he asked me, Papa, 1,520 score, this SAT is good or bad? I did not answer, and I went to the Google search and the text 1,520. I said it is 99% percentile. This is excellent. I said yes, it's excellent. So 1,520. This number for him is no idea, but 99% for him, he immediately had an idea, has a feeling. So it's the same. $10. You might think those $10. Why you spend time to drive 10 minutes to that store? But the other also $10 saving. You don't want to drive because the other one only saved 2%, but that one saved 22%. Which one you want to save? So for this part, the behavior is consistent with economic theory. So get back to your question. Another economic theory. I'm not trying to fighting with a psychologist. They have their theory. Economists have our theory, but it depends on how you use theory to explain human behavior.
I see.
Yeah. May I add, to what Tinchin has been saying, that humans are not robots, and we could call that we are very rational, but more often than not, we are not. I'll give you examples. Some of my doctor friends who are millionaires here, and I have seen them waiting for 1 hour to fill the gas where the gas is 10 cents cheaper than the other place. So in their mind, I think it is coming from that satisfaction from a saving, which could be like a $2 or maybe say $10, and think about the opportunity time, that the time that they could have used to do something else was much more. So, we are not a very good judger of our time and the utility. The theory is there, but we are not a great practitioner of that theory. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, I think what I'm getting from what you both are saying a lot is that I just need to understand economic theory better so I can make better decisions and actually calculate out how much time versus money I'm saving on things, because I tend to think that way a lot too. And I think that's common to think about money that you're saving or absolute values, the way they would sell it to you at the store. You obviously notice there's a lot of like $2.99, or they never round it up. The dollar amounts, it's always something 0.99 cents. And that was like a very simple example I noticed when I was younger, but it's very easy to think that you're actually saving money when that's just how it's given to you and you don't think about it as intentionally.
Yes.
Yeah. So for those who might have joined late, I wanted to remind you guys that both of our experts will be leaving in about 8 minutes. So if you have questions, it is a shorter Bugs, Booze, and Brains. After they leave, we will be doing 1 or 2 turn and talk questions. So please stick around. And we also have an announcement towards the end about our next season. So stick around, we'll continue. But if you have questions for them, you can start raising your hand, or we can keep talking. But if you have questions specifically about the book or about the topic, please feel free to ask them. Hannah, you're unmuted.
Yeah. Hi, I'm a bit under the weather, so I can't turn my camera on. I was just wondering, aside from prospect theory, what other specific economic theories would do well to explain some of these things that Thaler is claiming are consistent, but which are actually consistent?
Yeah, I mentioned about, prospect theory is one, Thaler's own mental accounting. And the other one that I mentioned about the choice under heuristics. So many times we simplify our choice process by simple rule, buy the cheapest, whatever is available, buy the one that is on deal. So this kind of goes against the utility to some extent. So there are a number of things like that which are in marketing, which we draw from the psychological theories.
I see. Thank you.
Other questions?
And if I may, Jill, one of your questions was that what could be some of the practical applications of Thaler's work? So, I have a couple of them, and that I think all of us can relate with. Do you think that this is a time to talk about them?
Yes, we do have a question, so we'll give Shauna and Tibor, if you want to unmute yourself. And
yeah, thank you. I just wondered whether either of our experts has looked at the mutual funds that Thaler is involved in. His, he's a partner in an investment management company, and I just wondered whether you had looked at those. And of course, they make investments based on his behavioral economics theories. Just wondered if you had any comments or thoughts about those funds.
Honestly, I am not familiar with this finance, so I really don't have any comment. Maybe Spear, you have a
no. I do not know about his particular funds, but one thing that I know that there was a guy who got a Nobel Prize on capital asset management. What got the name? So he had his investment firms, and it went broke. So the message is that a lot of times the theories does not work. And I would again say, since you guys raised that stock issue, you may think that stock market is one of the ultimate rational market, which is absolutely not true, because most of it is emotions and fear. Even the other day, because of that Omicron virus, have you noticed that how the Wall Street and all the stock markets all over the world has tanked? There is no message, no nothing. It is simply fear, psychosis that people have, and the anxiety that they get out of the market and all this. So stock market is not at all, people may say efficient. I don't think that it is. So putting models to set it right, yeah, it will work sometimes. Many times it does not work, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, welcome. So going back to those applications of Thaler's work, one thing that I think we can all relate with, I noted down, like the paying of the mortgage, because all of us has gone through that. Some of us have still going through a mortgage, and others might have paid off. But there's always a catch-22 that say you have still say $100,000 left, and you have a nice little interest that you're paying, maybe 3.5% or whatever, and you have $150,000 savings, and you're hardly making any money, but still more people will keep money in the savings and take the time to pay off the mortgage, paying higher interest rate. All right. So a rational economist will say that, okay, pay whatever mortgage is there and pay it off and have less savings. But we are human beings. We always feel that we should have the savings in the bank for the rainy day or kids' education or whatever. So we behave not in a rational way. That is one example that comes out from that. The other one that he talks about, and I think is a good one, is a 401k plans. So the records show that if you give the opt-in option, that means you must opt in to be part of it. That is one. Compare that with the opt-out option, that you automatically in the program, that if you choose not to be there, you have an opt-out option. More people tend to go for the second option because they feel that, okay, I'm there, I'm getting some immediate gains, because that immediate gain is an issue, right? For it, one of the first things that he talks about, the endowment theory. So we want to get that gain. So that is one thing that is there. Another example he gives is that, for those who do not pay the income tax totally, fully, and the government comes down at them very sternly with a message that you are at default, you are in arrears, pay it up or else. And what he says that that's not a good way to get people react. A much better way to do is that you are in a minority of people who have not paid the income tax in full. So giving them that option that, the losses are there, but you are not the dumbest of all that you are not paid. There are some people there, but not all. So Thaler feels that that is another way that you can apply his theories.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Vonnegut. And before, I know we're short on time, but Amy, I see you're raising your hand. So if you want to ask a question. Yes,
in marketing and market research, we look at behavioral economics a lot. And a lot of it is around people not having, fundamentally what it comes down to is people not having to make a decision, or if they have to make a decision, making it as easy as possible. I did some work looking at generic grocery products, private label products versus branded. And it turned out that people's willingness to use them varied by category, and the category really related to risk, how risky they perceived it to be to switch from a branded product to an unbranded product. So they were much more likely to switch for like paper towels than they were for cosmetics, for instance. And I think that a lot of what they're trying to do with behavioral economics is try to, it's this idea of nudging people to make decisions that they should be making as informed buyers, but don't bother taking the time to, or don't want to take the time, or don't have the resources to think about it. So use behavioral economics to steer people in that direction. And it is totally emotion. The way you make it work is totally emotion-based. It may be for ultimately the rational decision, but it's completely around emotions.
Yes, and I can respond to that. That's an excellent point, Amy. And I'll respond with an example of actual brands, how they do. There was a brand of early pregnancy test kit, EPT. So what they did is that, Amy talked about the private label. And so they had a branded product. So that was very colorful, and with the, a mom, expecting mom, and there are a lot of positive colors and all that, $19.99. And in the private label area, the same company had another brand, just a regular brand name, black and white, $9.99. And so this is a segmentation issue in marketing, we call it segmentation. And the manager said, the segmentation for us was very simple. The top one, the branded one, is targeted towards women who are expecting a yes answer. And the bottom one is targeting to the women we are expecting a no answer from the test. So, there is no economic explanation to that. It is purely emotions. And many times we take those decisions based on emotions.
Dr. Lin, did you have anything else to add to that?
No, I have no comment.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I know it's time. You both have to
We
go.
gotta
So
go.
yes, I really appreciate you both still being here. That was an excellent conversation. So thank you so much, Dr. Lin, Dr. Bandyopadhyay. Enjoy your dinner, and everyone else, if you can stick around, we'll go ahead and do the turn and talks. I have a few interesting questions that we can go through, and then we'll do announcements at the end.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
everyone
much.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much
Bye-bye.
for having us. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Take
Have a
care.
good night. Okay. All right. Thank you guys for sticking around. So we will go ahead and do a turn and talk. So this turn and talk is based on the concept of the mental accounting that we briefly touched on, that Thaler discusses. That's usually the way he describes it. The concepts he talks about, the theories he talks about, he thinks that they lead to human beings often making choices or decisions that are considered irrational. So two of the examples that we briefly touched on today already is, one is the endowment effect, which is the idea that human beings will pay to keep or maintain things that they already have, rather than pay for something else that might actually be a better deal or of greater value. Right. And the second one is the sunk cost fallacy, being that human beings will continue paying for consuming something, even if it's of negative utility, because their initial investment is something that they can no longer recover. So the question for the turn and talk is, are there areas of life where our inability to make rational choices harm us or impact us on a grander scale? So when I thought about this question, I was thinking more of like marketing techniques that are used to target people unnecessarily, or sometimes misusing these concepts and leading us to make, poor decisions, like spending $300 for something you don't need. And then having to use it for the rest of your life because you paid for it. So that's the question, and I will go ahead and put that into the chat. And then I believe you will be broken up into groups, and then we can discuss for about 5 to 8 minutes, and then we can come back and discuss it as a group. Put it in the chat, and Megan will be splitting you guys up.
Sorry, I was trying to manually assign the rooms and it's giving me grief. Hold on 1 second.
Zoom problems.
Weird breakout rooms. Okay, let me try this again. There we go.
You should be seeing a screen with the dialogue asking you to join. I wasn't supposed to join the room.
I was like, I was gonna hang out and talk to her for a while. I was like, I don't know if I can do this on my own, kind of thing.
Yeah. No, I joined the room and quickly realized I wasn't supposed to be there. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, since we're still on the live stream, we thought we could vamp a little bit with you, Jill, about kind of what you thought about the book and such.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay.
On your question, I'm not I would not consider myself an econ nerd, so a lot of this is very dangerously close to going over my head, but I've hung in there. But I will say I thought this is all very interesting, how close to Black Friday we are, talking about all this, this idea of what does marketing trick us into doing that we don't need is very, very relevant right now. So I thought that was very fascinating.
Yeah. I don't know how, I haven't thought enough about this, but I also think it's interesting how things have pivoted to no longer I just saw that Cyber Week is now a thing. It used to be Cyber Monday. They're just slowly inching towards everything is now online. Everything will now be, instead of one day, it's expanded to a whole week. Some places are doing a month or two of sales. And then every time I see those ads, I'm just like, oh, that sounds great. Like I have plenty of time and I can probably just like go every single week and get what I need. And that also reminds me of, I think this was like a month ago. I think they were starting in October and telling people to start doing their holiday shopping because shipping is going to be a nightmare. And you never know if you'll get your packages and gifts or not. And so they were encouraging people to start their holiday shopping in October. And I thought that is crazy. But people have been doing that. So I think it is very possible and kind of freaky how you can convince people to spend a lot of money on things that they might not need.
And there's like this whole nature of like, it's almost become like an eventized thing where I feel like, especially over the last like maybe couple decades, where it went from being like, oh, you just have to be out there at like 6 a.m. to 5 a.m. to 3 a.m. to midnight, and then it was midnight for a few years, and then it became like Thanksgiving day, night, and then day, and building up. And like you said, now it's this like whole, granted it's mostly online and COVID has a lot to do with that, but it's this whole like half a month to 2 month kind of like extravaganza. And like definitely am somebody that participates in all of it, but I found myself reflecting on a lot of that tonight in my like my wallet and my guilt like after participating in all of it.
Yeah, I wasn't ever a big holiday or I guess Black Friday shopper because that just sounded crazy to me that people would camp out. But it worked, at least from what I remember of how things were when I was younger. They did actually have deals. And it made sense for people to want to camp out for like $100 TV or something of that sort, right? Like people would buy their things that they needed for like several years at a time. So it would make sense. But now it doesn't make as much sense to actually go into a store and wait to buy things that you will get online. So just kind of, it's like it's been made easier to target people now that everything is essentially online.
Yeah, there's like, oh, good.
No, I was just gonna say, can I tell a both funny and sad story about Black Friday?
Absolutely.
So when I was a kid, my parents were stationed at an Air Force base in West Berlin. And when we first moved back to the States, my dad was like, oh my gosh, these sales are incredible. I can't believe it. I'm going to go out before anybody else wakes up. I'm going to save hundreds of dollars and I'll be done shopping for Christmas. And he came home like 12 hours later, just like completely like disappointed with humanity. And he never went shopping on Black Friday again. So that's how I learned what Black Friday was when I was 6 years old.
That is
nowhere else does that.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a sad story. He probably saved himself a lot of time and grief with that. Yeah, that's like a nice like recap of what every Black Friday seems like.
I've definitely like gone into the store. I'm like, I'm gonna get this like insert thing at Best Buy, and I grab the thing off the shelf. I'm like, to like the line, and then you see the line like kind of wrap all the way around the back of the store, and I'm like, put it back on the shelf and just walk out before I engage with all of the hilarity of it all. I don't know how much this ties in necessarily with the content and the theories of the book, but I do find this idea of like things, the durability of products not maybe being as long as they used to be, tied in with this idea of like still enticing you to maybe like re-up, or especially with like phone models nowadays, like re-up with that product every 2 years, and like you're more on a cycle, and how much that ties in with the marketing and expense of the product. Because we were just talking about like you go in and get that thing for a life, but now that thing you get for a life is going to have some kind of firmware update. Like usually it's on like a 2-year timer, right? So I find that like that integration of that idea into this whole hidden sunk costs idea very fascinating.
Yeah, I had a similar like thing that I think is like starting to affect my shopping patterns, which, you know, I did Black Friday for a while when I was younger, and it's like, you know, it's a thing you do. And then, you know, my mom and I went out this past weekend because, you know, we just haven't been out a lot. And we're like, well, let's go. It feels holiday-ish. It's post-pandemic, like, let's go out. And like, I saw something in a store, I wanted it, but the line was so long. I'm like, I'm not buying that. I'm going online. So like, I saw the thing in store during Black Friday, and I was like, I'm going to buy that thing, but not here because I don't want to wait in that line. So I was like already doing some kind of calculus there. I got the thing in the mail today. It was a small thing, and it was in so much packing material that I was like, what have I done? Like, it had like, it's unbreakable. It had like 6 layers of bubble wrap, a giant box. And I was just like, I should have bought the thing in the store, because what I've done to the environment in purchasing that thing online, as opposed to like waiting in that line. So that's like a whole other, you're talking about durability of products. I'm also thinking about, if I just pick that thing up, like all the people that drove it to me, that packed it, that like made bubble wrap and boxes and all of that stuff, none of that would have happened had I not just like waited in that line. So I also have this kind of, I think, new environmental awareness that is kind of entering into these conversations too, which is like, yeah, it would have been better to buy it on Black Friday, because everything it took to get it to my house is absolutely absurd. So anyway, that's like another layer of things that I think are starting to sway consumer behavior a little bit, maybe, in all of this.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I actually did not even, that didn't even come to mind when I was thinking about anything.
It was just so much bubble wrap, like
Yeah.
an absurd amount of bubble wrap.
As somebody that just got married recently and has unpacked quite a few Bed Bath & Beyond and other packages, I can tell you there's an absurd amount of bubble wrap floating around in these things nowadays. It's not even like actual bubble wrap, it's just like air pocket things that look like almost like little mini pillows, and they're all linked together. And so like, to get it all in the recycling bin, you gotta like snip them all, which my dog thinks is the best thing in the world because she wants to help with that. But like that, like, you were kind of getting us back on track, Megan, like that's been on my mind. I'm like, how much of this material that I'm putting in the recycle bin is actually going there, kind of thing. And like, it's a whole process. And like, I've had like a cardboard factory in this apartment for a while now because of it. It feels like.
It's funny to see like how I think it started to click for people that buying a lot of shit and having a lot of waste go hand in hand. One of the things that my neighborhood started a while ago, and it's popping up everywhere. There's actually an article in, I think, the New York Times about it, are these buy nothing groups in neighborhoods. And so they're like these really hyper local just groups of neighbors that like, I don't know, you can ask for something like
trading items.
So it's not trade, so you don't like trade or swap. It's like you can ask for something or you can gift something, and the idea is like you just do it without any you're not expecting anything in return for what you're giving. And so like we got a free snowblower. And then somebody went over, there was a neighbor who there was some roadkill ended up in her yard, and another neighbor went over and took care of it for her so that she didn't have to pay somebody to come out and bag roadkill for her. Like, it's services, and one person's trash is another person's treasure, right? But one thing I do see that goes around a lot is just like there'll be boxes of kids' clothing in like a certain size, and it'll just pass from like one family to the next because kids outgrow it so fast. And the same thing with like birthday decorations. But so anyway, that it was just kind of interesting to hear. I listened to this book, the audiobook, and so it was just kind of interesting to like have this little like micro thing that a lot of neighborhoods have started doing in the back of my head, while also talking about just like the massive amounts of stuff that we consume.
Yeah, all of this, and Megan, you can tell me if it's time.
Yeah, I just closed the room so people will make their way back in the next minute or so.
Okay. Yeah, I think that people are also, it's nice that there's more self-awareness about things like this. And also I think education impacts that, and broader education about like the environment and the effects that things like packing material has is actually changing people's minds, because it's kind of in line with the sunk cost fallacy, where whereas before you were thinking about individual benefits or utility or expected costs and benefits and things like that. Now it's more of a communal or community aspect to it too, because you're not just thinking about your own personal benefit from that. Is everyone back? Can you see Megan? Okay.
Now they are, I think.
Okay, sweet. All right, so the question that we talked about was, are there areas of life where our inability to make rational choices end up harming or impacting us in some way on a greater scale? So does anyone want to share what you guys talked about in your Zoom room? Any interesting topics? You can unmute yourself.
Well, I'll jump in. I hate to hear a silence there, but we really talked about two issues. One is retirement savings, where it's so hard to get people to do it. And the second is, I hate to say, the vaccinations. So, and that's all I'll say about that.
Okay, so for retirement, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so just jumping in to follow up on that with retirement, we were saying like there is definitely the case of inertia, and like people will tend not to save for retirement unless they have a nudge either from the company, like having them be enrolled automatically, or having a role model, like a parent who says, hey, if your company doesn't offer this, make sure you get enrolled in an IRA or another savings fund. Or like some banks are starting to offer like a save as you spend policy, where like you might make a purchase and then it'll round up to the nearest dollar and put that into your savings, and then it makes it really automatic.
And then
Yeah,
that essentially overrides some of the, I guess,
some of the irrational inertia of like thinking of it as, oh, this is a loss, as opposed to think of it as an investment.
Right. Just have the decision semi-made for you, makes it a lot easier to actually continue through with it. Kim, were you wanting to add something to this? Yes, okay. That was, I did just want to expand on the retirement thing in terms of like which effect or which irrelevant factor, I guess you would think that would have an impact, or through which it would have an impact on people. Other thoughts to share?
Well, I didn't talk about this in the group, but one of the things that goes on with digital marketing is all these things that you sign up for supposedly to get discounts. They're using that to collect your data. And people don't stop to think about the fact that, yeah, you may get your 10 cents or whatever, but what's happening is they're making millions of dollars selling your data to aggregators and to companies that want to look at that. So they're you're not acting rationally from a personal protection information security standpoint, but you feel like you're making a good decision because you're saving money.
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually, the group that hung back with me and talked about this, touched on a similar concept of like the personal, with the sunk cost fallacy, it's often presented as something that's personal, or even the endowment effect or the other theories where you're considering your personal loss and your personal gain. But more and more now, especially with the way that sales are turning more towards online platforms, and marketing is also primarily online now, you end up having this effect where you can't just think about your personal cost and benefit anymore. We were talking about in our group about environmental effects of shopping online and making purchases that come with a ton of bubble wrap, for example. And those are things that you don't necessarily consider right away as a, not as a sunk cost, but a negative when you're making purchases, but it is, and it has a greater impact. And that is something that eventually would be something you think about, where you have to weigh if it's actually better to go into a store and spend your time looking for something and then making that purchase and standing in line, or if you can just do the faster and easier route, which is go online and buy it possibly for cheaper, but then you get it in cardboard boxes with too much bubble wrap and peanuts, packing peanuts and things like that. So yeah, I think,
and I know one of the issues with social responsibility is it's very hard to get people to pay a premium for it. I mean, there's a limit to how much people are willing to pay for the good of social responsibility.
When it doesn't necessarily immediately affect
help them, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. Also pointed out, or I guess made a mental note that it seems like all of us are becoming slightly more self-aware about things like this. So we are actually moving in the direction of, we're talking about human behavior and how it impacts economic theory, but ideally, we're already moving in the direction where marketing would not be as easy. It wouldn't be as easy to target us with some of these techniques that use these concepts to get us to buy things or to get us to hold on to things that are that we think are a gain. And hopefully we're moving in the direction where we can kind of override some of those techniques to not fall into the trap, essentially. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
We talked about sunk costs as far as like health club memberships or timeshares. And even in the difficulty in trying to get your mind around getting out of those, because you think about all the money you've invested in it rather than what you won't spend in the future.
Yeah. I think Richard Thaler mentioned that in the book at some point, right? The gym membership example as well. And I remember thinking if it does actually have an effect on if it's had an effect on health outcomes for people to have like a gym membership that you're now bound to for a month or two, for example, or for a year. And if that actually does get people to go. Because from my personal experience, it doesn't necessarily. So that would, it's also interesting to think about whether or not these things have a benefit on people.
Yeah, I was actually I didn't mention this in our discussion, but I've actually found the sunk cost fallacy can be helpful if you're using it intentionally. Like I guess for me, this is more of the commitment strategy, right? And the sunk cost strategy is like blocking out certain days of the week to go to the gym helps me commit to actually doing that. But also the fact that I'm paying for the monthly membership helps with the motivation. Or, things like, I bought a ticket for this expensive event. Now I'm committed to go to this event, even though theoretically, I could skip it, but the cost is now used, quote unquote. It's a pretty powerful thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's pretty positive and negative.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually there is another turn and talk that we can segue into with this. There was a term that Richard Thaler mentioned called libertarian paternalism. That's to summarize basically using incentives to nudge people to into making the right decision. And that idea, I was thinking about this in terms of like the mass exodus of working class people. If in case you haven't heard about this, there are a lot of people currently quitting their positions, especially in the working class fast food industry, industries that were especially hit pretty severely by COVID also. And I was thinking about this in terms of whether or not it's possible to use the libertarian paternalism concept to nudge management and leadership at places like this to actually incentivize them in some way to make it better for workers or make it so that they're not quitting and make their work experiences better so that you don't have so many people quitting. Did that question make sense? Essentially, is it possible to use the libertarian paternalism concept in the world to solve issues like people quitting their jobs en masse? And if so, how do you think that would look? So we will take that question. I'll type it into the chat and break up into Zoom rooms.
Yeah, and we'll do a shorter one for this, so maybe just like 5 to 7 minutes, and I'll put you in the breakout rooms right now. So Jill, maybe for the folks that are like watching at home, like, could you talk a little more about the libertarian paternalism, like as you understood it?
Yes, so as I understood it, paternalism in general seems to be like a concept where there's authority that makes rules that are supposed to be for the benefit of the people that they're governing over, or looking over, or have power over. And the libertarian aspect of it is, I think, added by Richard Thaler to identify that this is something that can be used for good as in an economic principle, that you can have that you can provide certain incentives to any group of people that would nudge them to act a certain way. And I believe that was also, Richard Thaler also wrote a book called Nudge. Can't remember if that's what it talks about, but that's a basic idea. And so what I wanted to talk about with this question was, can we use that concept to solve issues that seem to be very prevalent in society today, where it seems like there are no solutions, or if there are, they're very difficult, right, to implement. And so can you actually just incentivize? That seems to be something that would benefit both parties. Can you incentivize management at like a McDonald's so that they can maintain a good working environment for their workers? And can you do that on a larger scale so it actually has an impact where you don't get people quitting? Yeah.
Do you have thoughts about how that would look, to pose your own question to you? I'm a cynic, so I struggle with this question.
Yeah.
If you need time to like think on your answer, I can like kind of in for
Yeah,
a second.
Sam, why don't you try?
Go ahead.
So my first thought actually went to like the international stage, and like economic sanctions that like the UN or more like nations perceived to be developed put on other nations that are engaging in practices that they don't agree with, whether that's some kind of like if you are going against like your nuclear arms pact, anything to like more even more awful practices such as genocide and the like. And we see folks, instead of going in and doing physical intervention, they put economic intervention. So that was where my thoughts first went when you were talking about that, but I'd be interested if you have other thoughts.
I was just thinking that there were quite a few incentives to bring this back. There were a lot of incentives to get people to go out and get vaccinated. And those incentives, after like the initial distribution, when it wasn't going as well, after that, the incentives were money and beer and things like that people would value. And it was very, I can't be sure about this, but I think it was very based on population and region. So like there were states that would have very specific types of incentives. Places that would have like lottery tickets versus places that will like just set it up outside, like a vaccination clinic outside of a pub. And they would be like, we'll get you a free beer. And that was enough to get some people vaccinated. And that idea of like, to answer, I guess, my own question, I think that if those incentives are personalized in a way and usually monetary or of monetary value, you can actually get people or nudge people to do sort of the right thing, or I guess in this case, whatever you want them to do, but ideally the right thing. So you could ideally offer, you know, a bonus or an added salary amount to management if they or like added vacation or something like that to get them to retain workers. And I'm realizing as I say that that's still not like a fair way to do things. So I'll think about it a bit more if anyone else wants to jump in.
No, I was just thinking, no, I actually don't think that's a bad idea. I don't know. I just imagine it's really like with the bottom line in some of these corporations and companies, like I don't know what's enough to like incentivize certain things.
Mm-hmm.
One example I was thinking of though, I think last year or something, we do a lot of this incentivization, if that's a word, through taxes, right? Tax breaks. And so I was thinking last year, I think there was a new tax break. If you gave $300 to a nonprofit, there was another like write-off. And so I was thinking about what was the purpose of that? I'm assuming like you would be incentivizing, you know, donations to nonprofits in a difficult year.
Mm-hmm.
But then you look at kind of how capitalism takes and transforms that inclination, which I think tax breaks for people that are doing good things for the world. And now it becomes, you know, tax shields, you know, people that are avoiding paying taxes, using these rules and loopholes, making up nonprofits to donate to, so that, you know, so I was thinking about like just how I like that idea so much, and I think it is like possible, but how it gets kind of perverted within the system that we operate in. I don't know. Like I said, I probably shouldn't be talking. I'm cynic by nature, so it's a little.
No, Megan.
I'm never gonna have like a rosy view of things.
I absolutely agree with that. I think that you can incentivize things and it will be turned into something else that favors certain classes or groups of people.
Yeah.
Ideally, you would just pay the workers a lot more and give them better working hours and conditions, right?
There it is.
So, so that would be the best. And so, and I don't think that would be. I suppose that would be libertarian paternalism as well, because you're incentivizing workers to stay, or, you know, if people want to leave a position, a lot of times they're offered like a bonus or a higher salary. That's something that's very possible.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see why not. Yeah.
People are starting to come back. I hope this is good timing.
Yeah. I think everyone is back. Okay. Okay, so to be completely honest, this question was something that I was thinking about and from a very idealistic viewpoint. And I'll be honest that I don't completely know the answer either. And I am curious to hear what other people have talked about, because I think we talked about potential ideas of where this could go. So does anyone want to share what they talked about in their groups? Okay.
Well, I guess I'll start speaking for our group. We very quickly started talking about systemic stuff, and how, like, talking about how workers can be incentivized to not leave jobs, but also how that means the businesses needing to be incentivized to give better benefits and better salary to the workers, which is a bit difficult systematically. So, like, for example, with a job, there's the appeal of both the salary in itself and benefits like health insurance and so on. And towards sort of a human perspective, it's hard to focus on the benefits if you're just looking at the higher salary. So that's one reason why some people might choose a job with a higher salary, but no benefits. When really what would kind of be ideal would be if, like, you could get these benefits anyway automatically, and that was not tied to jobs. And so really the only factor, the only main factor when looking for a job would actually be, the salary and the qualifications.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the rabbit hole that we went down.
Yeah.
So if anyone else in our group wants to add to that.
Yeah. I think the systemic bit is accurate. I think when you think about things like this, like any concept that involves a lot of different groups and steps that you would have to go through to ensure that you would be able to change things that would have like an economic impact on the companies, that is not as easy to do. And you can't incentivize leaders at the very top to always do that or act in a way that's libertarian, paternalistic towards their workers. So yeah, that I think we also talked about that. That's a really difficult idea to put into the real world. It doesn't sound as doable, and yeah, it's one of those things where there are certain steps that you can do that are considered right or ethically correct, but that don't make as much economic sense, or I guess profit would be the right term here. It doesn't profit the actual company as much, so at least not yet. So it's not considered a problem that needs to be addressed. And so you don't have to use incentives, because that doesn't seem to be the kind of solution that companies usually go for when they want to solve problems like this. Any other thoughts? Okay. Okay, great. Well, I will actually turn it over in a minute to announcements. Megan or Sam, I think, will be doing those. Thank you guys so much for being here. I appreciate it. This was our last Books, Booze, and Brains for the season. So season 9 is coming to a close, and I appreciate you guys being here. It was a last minute change to have our experts not be able to be here completely on time. So I know that impacted our turn-in talks too. I'm sure they would have had a lot of input for that too. So I appreciate you working with me. I'm not an economist at all. So yeah, I think that it was appreciated that you guys stuck around and discussed. And all right, take it away, Sam.
Thanks, Jill. If we were in an actual setting right now, I'd say we should do a round of applause for Jill, because she's been killing it the last few sessions now on hosting it. But I think for now, I'll say congratulations. Megan, I'll have you go to the start of the show. So as all y'all know, like, I'm newer to the program because I'm newer to Indian Humanities. So I'm a season 10 entrant here, but I know some of you have entered in maybe season 1, 2, 3, so on. A lot of you have been here for a while. And now that we're hitting season 10, we definitely want to, I'm sorry, I'm a season 9 entrant, but now that we're hitting season 10, we definitely want to celebrate you all Megan getting excited. We definitely want to celebrate that with you all and really like lean into this like 10th anniversary, quote unquote, of Books, Booze, and Brain. So we wanted to make sure we had a really solid all-star lineup of books for you all going into the next season. I'll have Megan, I think the next slide has all of them, maybe, could be wrong. Yeah, so the next slide has all of them. We have our dates as well as the book that will be at each section. We know some of you all like to spend December, like I do, kind of cuddled up around a fire with a good book. And this is a good time to kind of get started on the next season of Books, Booze, and Brain. So real fast, I can run through each of them. Fuzz is by Mary Roach. It's very popular right now. It kind of talks about animal crime, quote unquote, and looks at kind of when animals go bad or some of the things that happen in the national park setting and what rangers have to deal with. So definitely looking at ecology and zoology and the animal crime setting. So from there, we'll have February 22nd, which will be I Contain Multitudes. Author Ed Yong is, as far as I know, and Megan and Gilles and Rufus and the gang have told me like Ed Yong is somebody you all have wanted for a while. So we really wanted to make sure we got a book by him in there. So I Contain Multitudes is a lot about microbiology and what's happening in the body. From there in March, we will do Disordered Cosmos by Chanda Prescott Weinstein, apologies. And she does a couple things in this book. One, she's looking a lot of at physics, and I want to make sure I say it right. Subatomic particles, astrology, all that kind of fun stuff. We're talking about space and dark matter and physics. It's a good time, but she also looks at physics through the lens of race and how we can engage in equitable scientific research. I think I will leave off the teasing for there because that's a really good book. In April, we'll move on to Braiding Sweetgrass. Braiding Sweetgrass is, I have the author cut off on my screen. Oh, Robin Wall Kimmerer. And Robin Wall Kimmerer is an Indigenous author, and she writes a lot about botany in this book, but through the lens of Indigenous practices and linking those two lenses of the looking glass together, and it's a really good read. And then last but not least, the last day of May, we're going to do Galapagos by Kurt Vonnegut. We wanted to make sure we got a good fiction one in there for you all. We live in Indiana, so Kurt Vonnegut and Galapagos seemed like a really good call to do together. So those 5 dates are January 25th, February 22nd, March 29th, April 26th, and May 31st. And we're really looking forward to doing this lineup with you all as we move into 2022. The last thing I will say before switching it off to Megan is that right now we are planning on hosting all of these in person. We know a lot of you are excited about that, but we're still firming up those plans. So right now we have an eye towards doing in person, but we'll give you guys more concrete and specific details as we approach the new year. Megan, I'm going to pass the baton to you because we also have a special kind of like bonus on the road opportunity for you all that we want to talk about as well.
Yeah, thanks, Sam.
Rachel just posted a comment that we're still going to do the live stream as well for you all, and that's really important too. So if you don't want to move back to the in-person mode, we can definitely still have live stream available for you all.
Yeah, we will be, as scientists, we'll be keeping an eye on the public health situation and making sure we feel responsible in convening everyone in person, especially in January when things are probably continuing to evolve. But right now our plan is we've got the Blackacre venues kind of settled up. So you'll get emails from us and you can check our social media for updates on in person and where we'll be and whatnot. But we did have like one special bonus episode to share with you. So Galapagos, if you haven't picked up that book in a while, it's a really short Vonnegut book, and it's a fun one in which he kind of takes on evolutionary science and imagines how humans have evolved or devolved, depending on your perspective. But every year, the IU Arts and Humanities Institute down in Bloomington has what they call the Grand Falloon, which is a Vonnegut term. And they have basically a festival of Vonnegut every year. And so they've invited us to take Books, Booze, and Brains on the road and do a second conversation about Galapagos down in Bloomington. So if you are really into this book or just want to change of scenery, we wanted to let you know that we'll also be doing a conversation about Galapagos with a different set of scholars on May 26th at the Upland Bloomington Brew Pub Wood Shop down there as part of the full festival. So we thought we would share that with you since it's something a little different and an exciting, new partnership and for Books, Booze, and Brains. So just one last note for you all. So I will stop sharing my screen so we can all see each other's faces one more time. Yeah, so I'll leave it to Jill and Sam to kind of wrap up, but I just wanted to say we're looking forward to next season. We'll send a follow-up email with the book list so you've got it in your inbox, and we'll also update it on our website. So Jill and Sam, any last words?
No, just thank you guys again.
Yeah, same for me. Looking forward to seeing you all in the new year.
Yeah, stay safe, happy holidays, etc. And we'll see you in 2022.
Bye. Have a good night.